QSO Today, episode 405, Herb Goodluck N7HG. My thanks to ICOM America for sponsoring the QSO Today podcast. Welcome to the QSO Today podcast. I'm Eric Guth, amateur call sign 4Z1UG, where I demonstrate the diversity and relevance of the amateur radio hobby and its impact on society by interviewing ham radio operators, many of whom played vital roles in shaping our technology through the amateur radio hobby. And while many people might say, ham radio, do people still do that? This podcast demonstrates through in-depth interviews just how amazing, diverse, and dynamic the amateur radio hobby continues to be. Herb Goodluck N7HG is a member of the Navajo Nation and son of one of the famous World War II heroes called the Navajo Code Talkers. Herb keeps the Code Talkers memory alive with an annual special event at Window Rock, Arizona. N7HG is also an active ham radio operator and my QSO Today. N7HG, this is Eric, 4Z1UG. Are you there, Herb?
Yes, I'm here, Eric. This is N7HG. You are 59 coming in.
Thanks, Herb. I'm so looking forward to our conversation today, and I want to thank you for joining me on the QSO Today podcast. Can we start with first, what is the QTH?
My QTH here, where I live, is a little town called Lukachukai, Arizona, and it's a Native American Navajo name that was given to the community. It is actually called, in other words, in English, it would be white reed plants in the meadow. That's what Lukachukai is saying in Navajo.
And are you in the Painted Desert of Arizona?
I am about close to maybe 70 miles north of the Painted Desert. We're up in the northeast part of Arizona, just right around the Four Corners. And when I say the Four Corners is where the four states meet together, New Mexico, Colorado, the state of Utah, and Arizona. So we're just right up against the Four Corners, the northeast Arizona portion.
And I saw on a QSL card, I think it was a QSL card that was posted online, that you're near a place called Window Rock.
I used to work over in Window Rock, Arizona. That's the capital of the Navajo Nation. I was working there as a public assistant for the state of Arizona, 32 years.
So Window Rock is a small town, but its feature is like a beautiful circle right in the center of a rock face, right?
Right. That's where the town, Window Rock, gets its name from. It has, throughout the Navajo Nation, there's a lot of red stone formation. It's actually the wind, the rain, and the elements had worked its way through the sandstone rock. It looks like they refer to as Window Rock in that place in Arizona.
I'll include a picture and a resource in the show notes page for that. Herb, you're the first member of the Navajo Nation that I've ever interviewed, and so therefore I have questions about the Navajo Nation, as our listeners probably will as well. How many Navajo are in the Navajo Nation?
Wow. That's unheard of. I think there, Eric, me being the first Native American, we call ourselves the Ne, and then other surrounding people, they call us Navajo. Thank you for inviting me on this podcast. The total members that they were saying at one time might be just right about 300,000 mark, and including the kids. The voting, the population, the census back from 2010, there were like 173,000 voters on the Navajo Nation.
And the Ne are spread all over the territory that overlaps 4 states? I mean, are you spread out or are you concentrated in specific areas?
We have the Western Agency, the Northern Agency. The Eastern Agency is bordering into the state of New Mexico, and then we have the Southern area. the square miles of the Navajo Nation is right around about 23 square miles, 23,000 square miles, I believe. It's a big area. They compare it to West Virginia, the state of West Virginia, and it's almost the same size. That would be close to the area size, about 27,413 square miles. So that's a big area. If you put it into kilometers, it would be 71,000 square kilometers.
Certainly larger than Israel. I think we're less than the size of New Jersey. That's amazing. And what do the majority of the adult members of the Navajo Nation, what do they do? Do they have industry? Do you have manufacturing or anything like that?
Within the Navajo Nation, we have a real big problem with a high rate of unemployment. I think the biggest, as far as employment goes, with the Navajo Nation itself, the government, it has employees. I don't know how much, but I think, the Navajo Nation is our biggest. And then we got the IHS, which is acronyms for Indian Health Service from the government. And also we have the state of Arizona that it is employing people throughout the Navajo Nation. And also the Navajo Nation has its own enterprise with electricity, power, water, and gas. So the leading employee work, as far as work, was with the mining up in Kayenta, Arizona. Lately, through all the shutdowns on the coal mine, all those surface mines are being closed. Most of the people that I know, the younger ones, they go for employment down in Phoenix and Salt Lake and Albuquerque, New Mexico. So the bigger cities, that's where they go for as far as employment with the degrees that they earned there, Eric.
Does the Navajo Nation have a school system similar to the public school systems in other states? And do those schools go all the way into, say, junior college or even colleges there?
When I was growing up, I went to public school, the state of Arizona public school, and with New Mexico is the same thing. And back in the 1800s, the Catholic schools were built, and that's where my father attended school, in the Catholic school in St. Michael's, Arizona, not too far from Window Rock. And then you got BIA, which is a Bureau of Indian Affairs boarding schools they have throughout the nation back from the 60s, maybe going all the way back from the 50s. But most of the government schools have been pulling out contract school. That's what they have now, and running on the Navajo Nation now. And as far as junior colleges and universities, we have the Nick College in Saline, Arizona, and that's a 4-year program with the junior college. And then there's one over in Crown Point, New Mexico, that they offer degrees as far as a university level as well. I think I just know the acronyms, NTU, I think it was the name of it. I forgot what it stood for as acronyms.
I know that I'm calling your cell phone, and that's how we're communicating right now. Do you have internet service in the Navajo Nation, and is it throughout, or is it just in select areas?
When I was working with the state of Arizona, I had seen internet, the use of email. I believe it was back in 1996, or when they were using DOS, where you had to dial, on a telephone,
right,
on the copper wire. I think it's earlier than that, 1993, we had been using that. And then the internet barely came in, maybe 1996. From there on, just a big corporation like the state of Arizona had capabilities of going on the internet. It was probably until close to the 2000, that's when the internet had come onto the reservation. But most of them, they were on copper telephone lines until later, probably in 2006, we came up with fiber optics and they started moving fast. Right now, I do have connections with microwave. It's on a cell tower, and we receive it through the microwave, and it picks it up on the antenna, and that's how I receive Wi-Fi into internet into my house.
So you're kind of on what's called a WISP, right? WISP, Wireless Internet Service Provider.
Right. And also we do have a cellular phone as well. I think there's three different companies that are allowed here onto the reservation. The thing is, if you're wanting employment on the reservation, or if you want run a business off on the reservation, you have to meet certain criteria, and also you have to be a Native American and preferably Navajo to run all these businesses out here.
And do you find that there are companies that are actually making business on the reservation in some way? I mean, under those conditions, does that create opportunities for young Navajos to work on the reservation?
I would say, we have natural gas, two of them, with El Paso Gas and Transwestern Gas Company that runs through the Navajo Nation onto Southern California. And then we have electric power lines, two of them running through the state of or the Navajo Nation. It doesn't really employ a lot of Native Americans here. Everything's just automated nowadays. I think before they did, but after 2000, everything is controlled by the computers.
Herb, do you think that the fact that internet exists in the Navajo Nation now, it actually creates opportunities for advanced learning for residents of the reservation? Do you think it has the promise or shows the promise that everyone thought it would if the United States, if the entire country was connected to the internet, and especially those members of the Navajo Nation?
I would agree with, the advancement. For me, for example, if I do have questions like, pertaining to ham radio or how the computer works or how my phone works, or I usually resort to YouTube, and that's where I get my information. As far as having an Elmer, I think my Elmer would be the use of the internet to get from point A to point B. But since COVID has come about, the nation has decided to do some upgrades to relieve a lot of the flow of the internet. They added more equipment, upgraded the equipment, also the antenna, the orientation of it, because the public school children, they were given laptops to read and do their testing, their homework as well through the internet. So I believe we do have a real good success. Once the internet has come in, and we don't have to go travel 2 hours away to maybe a library or where we could learn more about the outside world, the rest of the world.
And now this message from ICOM America. Field Day is coming on June 26th and 27th, and since it is ham radio's most popular event, you can be a Field Day leader with ICOM. Connect with nature, connect with friends. You will easily cut through the pileups with a powerful and high-quality ICOM base station, the popular ICOM IC705 portable, the ICOM IC7300, and the ICOM IC7610 SDR transceivers are the clear choice for contesters and DXers across the globe. The ICOM IC705 is the perfect transceiver for hams who enjoy both the indoors and the great outdoors on Field Day. It is the perfect contesting companion because this base station provides features and functionality at the tip of your fingers in a portable package covering HF 6 meters, 2 meters, and 70 centimeters. And it weighs in at just under 2 pounds. Features include a 4.3-inch touchscreen with live band scope and waterfall display, 5 watts with the BP272 battery pack, and 10 watts with a 13.8-volt DC power source. Single sideband CW, AM, FM, as well as full D-Star functionality, micro USB connector, Bluetooth, wireless LAN, and micro SD card slot are all standard equipment, integrated GPS with antenna and GPS logger, and the HM243 speaker microphone is standard equipment. The ICOM IC705 has new accessories now available. The MBF705 desktop stand for just the right viewing angle on your desk, and the AH705 optional automatic antenna tuner that covers 1.8 MHz to 50 MHz bands with a 30-meter or 100-foot or longer wire antenna. The ICOM IC7300 is a high-performance, innovative HF transceiver with a compact design that will far exceed your expectations. This innovative HF transceiver digitizes RF before various receiver stages, reducing the generated inherent noise in different IF stages. This radio changed the way that entry-level HF transceivers are designed. Features include RF direct sampling, 15 discrete bandpass filters, a large 4.3-inch color touchscreen display, real-time spectrum scope, and an SD memory card slot. I have the ICOM IC7300, and it is by far the best HF transceiver that I have ever owned. It is always listening to 20-meter CW while I work. The ICOM IC7610 is the SDR transceiver that every ham wants. This high-performance SDR has the ability to pick out faint signals in the presence of stronger adjacent signals. The ICOM IC7610 is a direct sampling software-defined radio that has changed the world's definition of an SDR transceiver. Features include, but are not limited to, RF direct sampling system, 110 dB RMDR, independent dual receivers, you can be in 2 places at once, and dual digicell. For more information, click on the banner ad in this week's show notes page to get to the ICOM America website and its fine line of amazing amateur radios. And when you finally go to buy your next ICOM radio, be sure to tell your dealer that you heard about it here on QSO Today. And now back to our QSO. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about you now, Herb. When did you become interested in amateur radio, and for what reason? What was the spark that brought you to ham radio?
The first time I was licensed was June 13th, 1996. I believe what brought me to ham radio is back in 1974, I finished high school. I was going to a junior college in the southeast corner of Arizona, a little town called Thatcher, Arizona, Safford, Thatcher, Arizona. And I noticed a gentleman talking into a mic, and I was thinking, what is he doing? I was kind of, interested. I didn't ask him. So the second person, maybe 2 or 3 weeks down the road, they were talking to a microphone again. They were sitting in a gas station. I couldn't resist it. I just walked over there and okay, what are you guys doing? Are you a policeman? And so that's where my interest was in 11-meter citizen band. That's what they had. Also, maybe because of my late father, he enlisted in with the United States Marine Corps, was a Navajo, and he was picked for a Navajo Code Talker as a radio man back in 1942.
So this was during World War II, and apparently the United States Marines used native Navajo speakers to communicate so the Japanese wouldn't understand the communication, right?
That is correct. My dad was selected even when in boot camp in San Diego. They weren't told that they were a Navajo Code Talker until close to maybe until he was discharged from the Marine Corps. All he thought was he's a radio man and into the South Pacific Theater. And you had to be fluent in both Navajo language and also in the English language. So a lot of people or a lot of young Navajos that enlisted didn't have that much English. They were turned down and maybe just become a soldier out in the field like a grunt. That's just what my dad was telling me.
So in other words, your father and the people he spoke to on the radio were instructed just to speak in Navajo and not really told that they were actually speaking in a secret language that the enemy couldn't hear. They would just speak to other Navajo radio operators in Navajo and pass messages along?
That is correct, Eric. When they got on the air, everything was said in Navajo. And no, not even okay or Roger. And they had a code for Roger. And the code was in Navajo. I'll say it, the Banks Namanski. And in English, that would be, I give a ram back to you. A ram as like a sheep, a goat. They used the R for ram. And then another one was the acknowledgement was, I throw the ball back at you. And in Navajo, it would sound just natamp and ziknet. So that was a Roger, and everything was said in Navajo.
Oh, well, that's very cool. So I throw a ram back at you. I was doing a little bit of research for our conversation, and I noticed that in every place we were told during the COVID-19 that we should be 2 meters away from anybody else that we're standing near. I noticed a sign in the Navajo Nation that said that you should be 2 sheep's widths away from other people.
That's correct. To have, people understand, some of the older elderlies, they don't understand like 6 feet away. So, that's where that instructions or like a picture so they could comprehend the distance. That's the reason why they put that in there.
So let's go back to the Navajo Code Talkers. Obviously, it seems to me that many of these servicemen, these Marines who came from the Navajo Nation, they may not have known each other before they went into the Marines, but did they become fast friends and part of a circle once they returned from the war?
Actually, some of them, they were in school over in Fort Wingate, New Mexico, just a little bit east of Gallup, New Mexico. There's BIA school there. Used to be, I think the school's still there, run by the state of New Mexico. So some of them they knew before they got enlisted, but the people that didn't know, like, from the Western Agency, I'm pretty sure they got acquainted, in boot camp, and they became friends, and because that was their only partners, they wouldn't allow any other, person to be with, they were protected. When they were in the South Pacific Theater, they had bodyguards, and my dad didn't really know, all of the Code Talkers didn't know that they had bodyguards until they, were released from the military. When they were discharged from the military, they were told, you had a bodyguard. And if if you were engaging with the enemy, which is the Japanese, trading off maybe codes, then they were allowed to shoot you on the spot there, Eric.
In the Pacific Theater, the Navajo language was the secret code. I know that on the European front that the British and the Americans spent a lot of time trying to intercept and decrypt the German codes and ciphers that were used. So here you had men walking ciphers, and that's very interesting to understand how protected they were and how the government would protect the language from spilling over to the enemy side. So let me ask, did these men, your father as well as his cohorts in the Navajo Code Talkers, did they also become radio operators in the sense that they also operated Morse code? Did they have any interest in communications and radio when they returned back after the war?
That's the question I often get from other ham radio operators. Was your father, after coming back from the war, did they pick up like ham radio or any kind of radio, whether it's commercial or citizen band? I believe my father probably had interests, but he started off a family when he was still young. I think that's the thinking that the first thing was for him in his mind was to take care of his children. His family came first. So he never got into ham radio. I think the other also the other code talkers probably did the same thing. I was never aware, or nobody told me that code talkers had a license to operate on ham radio. I've never heard. So I think more or less they were just more interested in raising a family out here on the reservation once they returned.
I want to take a minute to tell you about my favorite podcast, the Ham Radio Workbench Podcast, with George, KJ6VU, and now joined by Rod, VA3ON, Mike, VA3MW, Mark, N6MTS, and Vince, VE6LK. Every 2 weeks, George and company offer up a status report on the many amateur radio projects on their workbenches and explore projects on their guests' workbenches. This group is project active and prolific, covering many technical areas of amateur radio. So the next time you want a deep dive into ham radio electronic project building, or to learn about technology, tools, test equipment, construction techniques, and the rest, listen to the Ham Radio Workbench podcast, available on every podcast player and channel. Use the link in this week's show notes page to get to the Ham Radio Workbench podcast directly. And now back to my QSO. So Herb, you're painting at least for me, you're painting a very interesting picture of how the code talkers were utilized. They were given messages, and they would repeat those messages in Navajo into a microphone, where it was picked up by another Navajo at the other end, taking the message and putting it back into English. So essentially, they were just used as a conduit for passing messages, and they may not have been operating the radio at all.
That's exactly true, Eric. Some of them, they went in just off and on. They were a part of the Carson's raiders. There was a group of raiders that just maintained, go and sneak to a Japanese camp in the evening at nighttime and did their thing and come back. So the Marine Corps were utilizing people like that, and then also our soldiers like that. Just one or two of them, the code talkers, were utilized in that fashion as well. Most of the time, just speaking, relaying the messages, back and forth. My father was on a battleship, and most of the time he was on there and transmitting to the island and back. And also he did several islands. He actually was involved in a couple of fights. So for instance, Hill 123 you would say H would be for horse, I would be for ice, and then the LL would be for lion. So here is what it would sound if I was transmitting in Navajo. And the 123 would just be a straight, there was no code for the numbers. So this is how it would sound in Navajo. He, Chin, Nashtu, Jad, Asai, Naki, Ka. So what I said in Navajo was Hill 123. And they were smart, the Navajo Code Talkers. They came out with a shortcut. Instead of saying HILL 123, they came up with a shorter version, which is horse ill, just like H is for horse, and then ILL is ill. So they compacted where it would sound he ta. That means in English it would be horse sick, and then the 123. So they really compact everything down, and I wouldn't even know what they were talking about. And for the L, you can't say lion twice in a word. So you had there was always three different like for L, there would be for lion, for leg, and then another L, maybe like a lamb, the beyaja. That's how you would say in Navajo. So you had to make sure you don't say the same word twice or the same letters twice in a word.
How many Navajo were code talkers?
The first wave, the tribal council on the Navajo Nation was asked if they could have, they requested for 30 enlisted soldiers into the United States Marine Corps. The first 29, one for some reason either dropped out or never showed up, and to this day is still questionable. The 30th person never showed up. So the first 29, they refer to it. That's the first wave. And then my father was in the second wave, and his platoon number is 297. And I think they graduated just right around maybe May of 1943, and then was shipped off into the South Pacific Theater. So the whole total, my father was within the 3rd Marine Division. I think the whole total there, the enlist for the Navajo Code Talkers was right around 400, they were saying.
That's a pretty large group. Herb, let's go back to your getting involved in 1996. You had this interest in Citizens Band. Did you actually get a Citizens Band radio in the 70s and start using it? Was that something that you tried?
Yes, I did, Eric. I had that interest back then, and I used to get on the Citizens Band, and more and more, they were using, I guess, what they called handle. And I was trying to think of, how do they operate, going back and forth. And once I get on the interstate, close to getting back home from my junior college, I noticed, there was a lot of chatter, on Interstate 40, and that's just south of where the Navajo Nation runs all the way across the country on the interstate. And they had truckers, talking on there. And once I get back to the house, and back then I had a girlfriend, and I used to pick up her at her aunt's house and take her out for the evening or for the day and drop her back off. And I was still in college, and my father, he let me use, I believe it was a 19 73 or 72 Ford pickup truck, a long wheelbase Ford. It was red, kind of like orange color. And I used to drive up to my girlfriend's aunt's house, and they jokingly, came up with, a name for the truck I was driving, and they used to call it Red Baron. So that's where I got my handle. I was known as Red Baron from there on, and just throughout the Citizens Band. So I was known for Red Baron for a while. I even got a Citizens Band license, and my call was KBG 3499 that was given to me from the Federal Communications Commission, and that was my given license for Citizens Band. But you didn't really have to apply for that license, but that's what I was given. That's Kilo Bravo Golf 3499 was my call on 11 meters. But I wanted something different, and I found out that there was ham operators where you had to take a test. The test that I took was back in June 13, 1996. My younger brother, his name is Paul. He was the one that kind of directed me to the high school over in Chinle, Arizona. A high school. He was working there as a maintenance for the high school, and the teacher there was teaching electronics, and he had a couple of VE, volunteer examiners. Yeah, there you go. From Cortez, Colorado. That's where we came out for the night. My brother was saying the testing's going to be here. The examiners are going to be here 2 weeks from now. So I took off to the nearest Radio Shack. They had Radio Shacks back then. And I grabbed a novice and also a technician study book. It had some formulas and also the how to get on ham radio, where to get licensed, and it had all that information. So I went to Gallup, New Mexico, which was 15 miles away, and got the resources that I need to become a ham. And I took my test for novice back then, and also technician. I passed both of them, and also my brother, he passed both of them as well. And I was given Kilo Charlie 7, Whiskey Victor Lima. That was my call. And my brother's call was KC7 WVK. So he was licensed before me. So that's how I started. And then later on, I didn't really like the Kilo Charlie, and then I was really interested in the November call. So I changed my license to November 7 Hotel Romeo Bravo, and that was a vanity call. And just finally, I ended up, once I passed my extra, also with the Morse code before the year 2000, I believe it was 1999, in the month of July, I passed my extra, and I did apply for a vanity, which was, I'm now November 7 Hotel Golf N7HG is my call sign given to me by the Federal Communication, and that's what I have now, Eric.
Is your brother still active?
Yes, he is. He does still have his call. He hasn't upgraded into a general. I talked to him. I have a extra HF radio I was willing to give him, but he didn't really say anything about the upgrade or about the radio. I still have the radio here with me. I don't know, maybe he lost interest in it, or maybe he might come back into it later on in the year, Eric.
Are there other hams in the Navajo Nation?
When I was first licensed before, right around 1999, I think there was quite a bit of them that passed the novice, and then some of the technicians came in. It wasn't required Morse code to get on the technician back then. So most of them, they just became a technician, just stayed as a technician, and then some of them moved away. Some of them lost interest in it. Some of them, due to COVID, they passed on. Not that many across the Navajo Nation. I would say maybe less than maybe 20 of Navajo people that are involved in ham radio, but really not on the air, all the time. You could just see their license when you go to QRZ.com, and they still maintain their license, Eric.
We will return to our guests in just a moment. A new way to show your support of the QSO Today podcast is to buy me a coffee. I consume gallons of coffee to create this weekly podcast. Invite me for coffee by pushing the yellow button, Buy Me a Coffee, on the QSO Today show notes page. And now back to our QSO Today. In your QRZ page, you say that you have a VHF, UHF antenna on your tower. Who are you talking to? Are you able to hit repeaters that are some distance away from where your location is now?
Yes, I do. I think I have, I would say, close to 5 repeaters that I can get into from my location. The elevation here is about 7,000 above sea level, and convert that into kilometers, or probably like 2,065 above sea level. So I'm pretty way up high, and I have 11 elements that covers the VHF, and also I believe it was like maybe 7 elements on the UHF. And the furthest that I got into from my location was into south central Utah, which is about 250 miles away. And I was able to communicate with some of the hams in that portion of the region. I had a couple of friends when I used to live in Window Rock, Arizona, and my friends, they were working with Frontier Communication. It's a communication for two-way radio as far as commercial business-oriented communications. They work on mountaintops with repeaters. So that's how I got them involved into ham radio. They got me involved as well. I used to have a repeater over in Window Rock, Arizona, and I think the elevation was 8,100 above sea level. And we had a remote base off of there, another radio connected to the repeater, which we were able to dial in local repeaters around. We could get into Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then as far as Phoenix, Arizona, once we get into other link radios, and also into the state of Utah. So we had a real good further communication-wide for VHF and also UHF bands. And then I had another repeater over in a low town called Chindley, Arizona. And I think the elevation there was right around 7,800 above sea level. So we had both of the repeaters connected via another radio, a link radio, and we used to have a lot of fun within the Navajo reservation that was covering the eastern portion and the central portion of the Navajo Nation. And it really worked well for a while. We started running into some trouble, people leaving the company, and I didn't have keys for the site, the radio site on top of the mountain, and there was beginning to be a lot of work with the repeaters, and all we did was used Motorola equipment. So some of them, sometimes, it burns out or it failed, and it was just beginning to be too much for me. And from my location, it was probably like one part, the repeater was like maybe 200 miles range all the way around. So I just gave up. I just sold both repeaters. If it was a pretty brand new one, it probably could have been still up and running. But we did have a struggle with that. But when it was up and running, boy, a lot of people got on there, and we really enjoyed the VHF and then the UHF portion of the band using repeaters on top of the mountain.
It seems to be a problem that, there's a lot of people that enjoy it, but there aren't very many people that know how to fix it. So it becomes the job of the guy that knows how to fix it to drive 200 miles, and that's a day's worth of work in order to turn something back on. Let me ask you, Herb, what is your favorite operating mode? I mean, you have a nice tower and you've got a beam on top. What's your favorite operating mode?
My favorite is voice, which is a single sideband, the SSB portion. The band that I really like enjoying is 6 meter contacts, and also 10 meters contact. It seems to be really hard to work, at times. The band openings, particularly for the 6 meter, is not there all the time, and it's a struggle, hit and miss kind of a thing. And I really love working 6 meters because of that. And also 10 meters, when the sunspot cycle is open, when the propagation is right, then, 10 meters, that's where you'll find me. But I think with the 20 meters, 15 meters, 17, 40 meters, and 80 meters, it's just too easy of a contact for me. I don't really have to put a lot of effort, or my radio it can easily pick up. I can be heard with the directional antenna. So I love single sideband on 6 meters and 10 meters, Eric.
Do you operate contests, Herb?
Once in a while, I will get into different contests just to see if I can contact, the event. Really not really into it, but the only one that I have, it's really not a contest station. It's just a special event station. I try to promote awareness with the Navajo Code Talkers. It's a conjunction with the Navajo Code Talkers. I request each year to get a one-by-one call from the Federal Communication. The call is November 7 Charlie, N7C, and we operate just right around August the 14th of each year with a special event. I've been doing this since 2004, and quite often I get ham radios operators. They ask me, so how much money do you put into this special event? Like, your equipment, which is the radio, the antennas, and, something to run in it, like a generator, batteries, solar power, and then also traveling to the event and back home. How much do you spend on all this? My answer is, to me, it's like I don't really don't particularly care about how much I spend. It's the code talkers that I want to put them on the spot where I can deliver a part of history to the world throughout the states, if not to the world. So that's where I get my probably my money back. Whatever I put in, and the legacy of the Navajo Code Talkers, the history. I want that to continue further on. Maybe one of these days my kids might get involved, or my relatives, my siblings. Maybe they can carry this on into the future, Eric.
Do you supply a QSL card or a certificate for working the special event station?
I try to come up with a QSL card each year. So far, I think I have 10 different images of the QSL card. And I usually put November 7 Charlie on there, and also Navajo Code Talkers, and also a picture. What I think, it would grab, the attention of the operators. I do have on QRZ, if you look up November 7 Charlie, I do have the current QSL card. And within the last 2 or 3 years, I have come up with a certificate as well for the special event. I try to change the image on the cards, and I think nowadays everyone, but more and more ham operators are getting to digital. I might go into digital QSL. I just got to learn how to do it, or someone has to show me how to do it on the computer and send out the digital QSLs.
Do you invite other hams to come to the Navajo Nation and work the special event station with you?
Yes, I do. I have 2 gentlemen from Phoenix, Arizona, W7 USA, Ray, that comes out, and also Bob, K7 Back Home Mom, I call him Bob. That's Kilo 7 Bravo Hotel Mike. They're really supportive, coming out from Phoenix area to the Navajo Nation up in Window Rock each year on August the 14th. And then I also have another person over in Houston, Texas, that covers back into our area, which is the West Coast, up into the state of Washington. His call sign is W5 PDQ. He's out of Houston, Texas, and he helps me out, quite a bit. Kind of like a remote station for us, because on 20 meters we can't cover the West Coast. So that's where he ends up helping us. I wish if we had like a remote out on the East Coast, maybe out in Maine, where the signals can be brought back into the West Coast. That would really help us out, Eric.
I'll put a link on the show notes page to the special event station, so that if the listeners are interested in either coming to the Navajo Nation and working the event with you, or even working the event remotely for you so that you have greater coverage, hopefully those listeners will volunteer. And wouldn't that be great to really get the story of the Navajo Code Talkers out to the rest of the world? Is the Navajo language still live and well? Do young Navajos learn the Navajo language as well as English?
That's a pretty interesting question, Eric. Back in the year 2006, I did have a chance to go to Albuquerque, New Mexico, the Native Americans that lives within the state of New Mexico got together there, and Navajo Nation was invited. And you hear all these different indigenous people, their language, they're struggling with it. Maybe just the baby boomer population really knows the language, fully, and the new children, maybe 18, 20, the language in their area is going away. It's more and more English is being spoken at home, but on the reservation, there's an immersion school that are being contracted, and lately with the state of Arizona, they're coming in and saying that should be taught, the Navajo language should be taught at home, not in the school. So more and more, I think the education board from the Arizona, they're getting away from teaching at the public school the Navajo language. But before, it was a real good thing. I think, they were picking up. There's a couple of schools, grant school, they're different from, they don't have to adhere to the state of Arizona. They're really pushing the little kids, even from kindergarten, first grade school, they're learning Navajo. They read and write the Navajo language. So within the Navajo Nation, some of them are losing it. The other people that live in Phoenix, Albuquerque, borderland people, they're more and more comfortable, I think, learning the English language. And maybe one of these days it's going to be gone. My grandma, she always used to say, one of these days, the language is just going to become one. And, more and more throughout the indigenous world, you begin to see that. I think the language they want to speak is English, Eric.
Well, I certainly can understand the desire to speak English because it's a universal language now. On the one hand, on the other hand, as a person who lives in a country where we revised our Hebrew language after it was not spoken for 2,000 years, there's a lot to be said about maintaining the tribal language, if at all possible. But it takes a big effort, not to quote anybody, but it takes a village to kind of dedicate yourself to maintain the language so that it doesn't die out. It's really an important part of culture. What excites you the most about what's happening in amateur radio now?
I think the digital world really excites me. Often I get emails and they want me to get on FT8, get on there on 6 meters. I haven't get any equipment, software for it. So I think that is really exciting. And also, like I was saying earlier, the QSL cards, I think most operators are, heading that direction as well. Digital QSL cards, Eric.
Herb, on your DMR hotspot, do you have a talk group that you like to hang out on? If somebody wanted to catch you on DMR, do you have a specific talk group where you like to be?
When I started the worldwide, I forget what the numbers were for it. That's what I listened to a lot. And then I ventured off from there to, I think was Arizona. They had Arizona in there as well, and then also New Mexico. That's what I listened to the most. And then there was another one just within the United States, North America, I believe it was. Yeah, North America. I was listening to that too as well. But no, there's so many different groups that they have, and DMR is just one portion of it. And you got Yesu, you got all this others DMR or digital radios, I should say. that I haven't really gotten into yet.
All of these DMR radios like the Anytone, these radios are so inexpensive compared to perhaps the System Fusion radios and stuff that I think that probably is what drives the numbers. And I think DMR is kind of quote-unquote open source now, so I think that there just may be a lot more hams who are on DMR than on some of these other digital modes. Well, you know what? Since we know your call sign, Herb, we should be able to find you or even connect you directly on DMR just using your ID number. That'll be a project for one of these nights when I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to make my DMR hotspot work. Let me ask one other question. Do you have advice, Herb, that you would give to newer returning hams to the hobby now that you've been a ham radio operator now for over 20 years, almost 30 now?
People are really interested, throughout the world, where you come from, if you're Native American or different nationalities, I like to know, pass on, so, there's really good, interest. It all depends on where you can find it. I think, I would, say something like that. Maybe first of all, welcome back to the science hobby. And, it's really changed, and maybe you can get into the digital stuff where it doesn't, scare you off, again. Maybe I can help, or so I would say something like that to them.
I want to thank you so much, Herb, for joining me on QSO today. This was really fascinating for me and really a great pleasure, and I hope that you enjoyed it as well.
I feel the same. Really surprised that I was given the opportunity to be invited to QSO today. Whatever information that I gave out, hopefully it inspires, some of the people throughout the world, and maybe they can contact me, email me if they want to know more about me. I'll be glad to share that with other hams as well. So thank you for the invite.
My absolute pleasure. I'll remind the listeners that there's a comment section under the show notes section of each episode, and that's a good place to ask questions. If you put questions there, I'll make sure that the guests, including Herb, actually see those questions and that they can reply there, and that's a good place to do it. Herb, thanks so much. 73, I really appreciate your taking the time today to speak with me.
Real good there, Eric, and thank you again for inviting me. All the best to you and yours, and we say 73.
That concludes this episode of QSO Today. I hope that you enjoyed this QSO with Herb. Please be sure to check out the show notes that include links and information about the topics that we discussed. Go to www.qsotoday.com and put an N7HG in the search box at the top of the page. My thanks to ICOM America for its support of the QSO Today podcast. Please show your support of ICOM America by clicking on their banner in the show notes pages. You may notice that some of the episodes are transcribed into written text. If you'd like to sponsor this or any other episode into written text, please contact me. Support the QSO Today podcast by first joining the QSO Today email list by pressing the subscribe buttons on the show notes pages. I will not spam you or share your email address with anyone. Become a listener sponsor monthly or annually by clicking on the sponsor buttons on the show notes pages, or use my Amazon link before shopping at Amazon. Amazon gives me a small commission on your purchases while at the same time protecting your privacy. I'm grateful for any way that you show appreciation and support. It makes a big difference as I head towards episode 400. QSO Today is now available in the iHeart Radio, Spotify, YouTube, and a bunch of other online audio services, including the iTunes Store. Look on the right side of the show notes pages for a listing of these services. You can use the Amazon Echo and say, "Alicia, play the QSO Today podcast from TuneIn." My thanks to Ben Bresky, who edits every single show and allows both this host and my guest to sound brilliant. Thanks, Ben. Until next time, this is Eric, 4Z1UG, 73. The QSO Today podcast is a product of KEG Media Inc., who is solely responsible for its content.